Welcome back, everybody. We're excited. This is our new episode this week, and Shannon Johnson and I am Jasmine Shapiro are so excited to have Mark Pasquesi with us today. He is president of Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices Chicago, and he is also special to us because he is our managing broker. So we've known you for quite a while, Mark, and we're thrilled that you agreed to come on our episode today.
Well, I'd like to just say thank you for having me on. This is my first official podcast,
Oh.
so very exciting for me. I'm looking forward to this. So I just hope I look good and answer the questions properly. So yeah,
we'll let you know.
Right, okay, good.
So tell us a little bit about how you got involved in real estate and what all that looked like. How you ended up as president of Berkshire Hathaway Chicago.
Let me just say, it kind of happened by accident. It was something I never intended to get into real estate. I kind of just stumbled into it. So after college, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, so I went to law school. And even then, it was because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I thought getting a law degree would be helpful. Went to law school, took the bar exam, started practicing law, always knowing that I just knew I wasn't a career attorney. It wasn't going to be my lifelong journey. And a few years into being a lawyer, one of my brothers wanted to buy an investment property in the city, and I said, I'm going to get my broker's license and help him with this. So I did just that, and as an attorney, you don't have to get all the pre-license education, what have you. Worked with him, bought a property. The whole experience was so enjoyable for me compared to what I was doing as a lawyer, no offense to the lawyers out there, that I was like, this is what I want to do. So I transitioned from lawyer to realtor and just hung my own shingle and started Pasquesi Realty. And that's kind of how I got into real estate. Then in 2008, when the market tanked, it was difficult to keep my brokerage going. And so I transitioned to join Prudential Rubloff and then became a manager there. After a few years there, kind of managed multiple offices and then ended up as president of brokerage at Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices. So it's been kind of an unusual journey, but one I've loved. And what it's made me realize is, I remember when I was practicing law, I thought that adage that like, do what you love or love, if you can find, you have to be passionate about your work. I kind of never believed that. I was like, who really loves going to work and what they do? I can say right now, that's exactly how I feel. I mean, it does exist, and so I'm happy to be doing what I love dodoing.
Well, and people love working for you. I can tell you that. So, it shows in what you do. So,
and our leaders,
absolutely.
you and Diane, I think also for Berkshire Hathaway Chicago. I mean, we were a family, and the culture there is very different than most brokerages, and I think that stems from the top, so thank you.
Yeah, well, and great. And one thing about working with someone like Diane Glass is, I think a lot of times people think you have to work with someone who's just like you and has the same views and opinions, and in fact, I think the best partnerships are those that aren't exactly that. Diane and I are different in many ways on how we view things, and we have differing opinions, but we work so well together, and I think that's why we make such a good team.
And Diane Glass is our other president at Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices
CEO,
Chicago. CEO.
Mm-hmm.
So just so for those of you who don't know that.
But Shannon, I think too what Mark is saying, that you and I are partners in real estate, and we both bring different strengths to the team, and that's what makes us work.
Definitely.
So I agree with what you're saying there.
Totally.
Yeah.
So the reason we brought you on today is because there's this big lawsuit that's been going on in real estate against the National Association of Realtors and several major brokerages, including Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices. So give us a little bit of an overview about what that is and what the settlement is and kind of what the allegations are and what is it?
And it's also, it's not just in Chicago,
this is nationwide.
First of all, I have no idea what you're talking about. I don't know anything about it like that. So there was a lawsuit filed, and in March, there was a settlement. NAR announced a settlement in which most MLSs and most major brokerages are part of. And there's basically three components to that settlement, which is basically one, part of the settlement is that sellers are not required, nor have they ever been required, to offer buyer compensation. This settlement makes it very clear, almost abundantly clear, that they're not required to offer buyer compensation. It's fully negotiated, it's fully negotiable, always has been, but this settlement, it kind of puts it front and center. The two additional parts of the settlement are really, I think, the biggest changes, I think, for the real estate industry and how they're going to adapt to it. And that is, the MLS has always been a platform where compensation to the buyer's agent has been offered. That is going away come August 17th as part of this settlement, which means when listings are offered on the MLS, there will be no offer of buyer compensation on the MLS. Some agents and brokerages are concerned about that. I think it'll change a little bit about how business is done. And then the third change is going to be buyer agreements. Exclusive buyer agreements have always been a part of our industry. What this settlement is requiring is that a buyer and buyer's agent must execute a buyer's agreement prior to the first showing. That is going to be a change for many agents. For other agents that have been doing it the right way for a long time, no change. So those are really the three biggest components to the settlement.
And there are states where that's a law.
Absolutely.
Not here in the state of Illinois.
Correct.
However, it is on the docket.
Yep.
So it may very well be a state law anyway.
Yeah, and really, I think at the core of what this NAR settlement is trying to establish, although I think the way they got there may have been a little bit confusing, is transparency on both sides, really. And so, right, by taking away the commission on the MLS, I'm not sure that's transparent, but I think what they're trying to do is when a buyer starts their home buying search with an agent, they want that buyer and buyer's agent to have a conversation up front so buyer and buyer's agent fully understand the relationship, including compensation.
Right.
That has been the case for many agents and how they've done their business, but for others, that has come later on down the path. Sometimes agents will say, I'll take out a buyer for a few times before I get them to sign the buyer's agreement. This is really forcing buyer's agents to have that consultation with their buyer up front. And honestly, I think that's a really good thing. I think it's going to take away any uncertainty as to how the relationship works.
Right. And I think it's really important that the NAR settlement, the settlements that have been made through individual brokerages, no one has admitted fault.
Mm-mm.
So that is not a part of this. But if they had tried to appeal these lawsuits, it would have been so astronomically expensive that really it wasn't a feasible solution.
Completely. It was so astronomically expensive settling, and for the short time that the discussions went on. And you can see every major real estate company settled. There was just no way around it. And
Berkshire Hathaway was the last holdout.
Correct.
They really held their guns as long as they could.
And really never wanted to, but it was kind of what had to be done to move on. And really where we're at now, it was the right thing to do, in my opinion. I think there's no doubt that come August 17th, and even leading up to it, there's going to be some changes that the industry will have to figure out and smooth out. We don't even know exactly how that's going to play out yet. So it'll be interesting to see how that happens.
Everything's kind of a wait and see right now.
Yeah.
You even said this morning that things are changing even today.
Mm-hmm.
So what we talk about right now in a few weeks might be changed once again.
Okay, I know it. Okay, got it. Yeah.
So that being said, talking about changes, there have been some very sensationalized headlines that maybe some misinformation out there in the media. So what should home sellers really expect to see?
So the home seller experience shouldn't change all that much. The only real change is previously a home seller would sit down with a listing agent and negotiate the commission for the sale of their home. And in that discussion would be an offer of compensation to the buyer's agent. And that may be 6% total with 3% going to the buyer's agent. What likely will
Or any other number.
Exactly,
Because that
exactly.
number was always
Thank you for
negotiable.
Thank you
Most
for
of
pointing
the
that out.
time,
Right.
whenever we did a listing presentation, usually the sellers had a number in their head. We didn't just walk in and say, here's what you're paying
Yeah,
us. They always had a conversation with us.
A discussion, a negotiation
Yes.
over the commission to be paid to listing agent and to buyer's agent.
Right.
Correct.
And so that will continue in the same way. It'll be negotiable as it's always has been. The one change is there is now the platform that was used to advertise that offer of compensation to the buyer was the MLS, where all the listings are advertised. That is all fields associated with buyer compensation come August 17th will be removed from the MLS, so there will be no advertisement of buyer compensation on the MLS. That's the only real change to kind of the seller experience. Again, one thing about the experience will differ depending on the kind of market. Like right now, it is such a strong seller's market that many homes that are going on the market are generating multiple offers. And so, the offer of buyer compensation may not be as significant if it were a buyer's market. So I think a lot of this, the changes sellers will see sometimes will depend on the market. But the reality of it, as a result of this settlement, the only change sellers will see is the removal of buyer compensation from the MLS.
And I know that with BHHS, we have already, quite a while back, updated our listing agreements. Previously, there was one space to write the compensation for what that percentage commission was going to be. And we now have a space that actually says, this is the total commission and this is what we will be paying the buyer's agent.
Correct.
So it's very transparent that seller knows what they are paying the buyer's agent up front.
And we've had that in place now for some time. And in about 4 hours, there's going to be more changes to the, no, seriously, like to the listing, to be even more transparent. And because I think the one thing you're going to start to see now as we see this play out, and I think what this settlement has created is an environment, like certainly it will create change, but we don't know how it will play out in practice. And so until we see that, we're going to have to adapt as it
tweak it along the way.
And so I think right now our listing agreement is perfect, where it has the total amount, how much is being offered to buyer's agent. That will continue to be tweaked, and then we'll see how it plays out come August 17th, and it may change again.
Correct.
So-
And what about, you alluded to the buyer's
Buyers.
side.
I think buyers are a little freaked out, especially first-time home buyers.
And I think the biggest difference to buyers is now the understanding or the belief that, oh my God, I've got to pay buyer's agent commission. And to me, it's really, and obviously that's part of the buyer agreement. So now, I guess for buyers, the biggest difference is for a buyer to see a home with a realtor, with a broker, they have to execute a buyer's agreement with their agent prior to the first showing. Now, the only way they don't do that if they were to go directly to the listing agent.
Or an open house.
Or an open house, correct. So that's kind of the biggest change to buyers. But I think the mindset of the buyer is a little bit concerned with this concept that, oh my God, if seller's paying the seller's agent, now I'm responsible to pay the buyer's agent. But it's kind of how you look at it. Certainly the belief has been that sellers prior to August 17th have paid the commission because it's negotiated with them and they execute the listing agreement. But buyer's the one paying the purchase price that ultimately the commission is being paid out of. So it looks at, you could almost say that really the buyer paid all of the commission. So really
Semantics.
Exactly, it's exactly what it is. It's semantics. So come August 17th, really nothing changes other than the clarity and the separation of conversations between buyer and buyer's agent, seller and seller's agent, so that everybody is aware of what they're paying. It's all going to be part of the closing. It's not like buyer's going to have to say, oh, here, I've got to write you a check for your commission, here you go. And I think once buyers realize that, I've gone like this with what the expectation of how much chaos this was going to cause. And at times it's been very high. I really think that initially, and I kind of find it amusing that they chose August 17th as the day to implement this, which is a Saturday.
Right.
Like, really?
Right.
Like, I don't know why they chose that, but I really think there's no doubt there will be a period, I think it'll be a short period of figuring this all out. Once it is, I don't think it's going to be a fundamental change in how we do business. Honestly, I think it's going to be, hey, now buyer's going to have the conversation with their agent about commission, seller's going to have their conversation. They're both going to provide commission statements that'll happen at closing. Everybody's going to get paid out accordingly, just like they are now. Except now the commission statements only come from the sell side because they were the ones that executed the agreement.
And I think a lot depends on how the brokers have been trained.
Mm-hmm.
And Berkshire Hathaway has done a fantastic job,
Yep.
almost to ad nauseum about how much training we've had.
Tell me about it.
But things are changing
I know.
so rapidly that we constantly are having more updated trainings.
It not only, like, you're spot on, because I've like been talking about this ad nauseum, like you said, and even just right now before we sat down, new forms just came out that were like,
Right.
wait, more changes. Like, this is an ever-evolving situation that until it actually gets implemented and we start to see how it shakes out, we won't exactly know. But it's all about training and doing things the right way. And you know, I mentioned this previously off camera, which was, I really think this is going to be a good thing for our industry, because one of the, I don't know if you want to say complaints about our industry, has been a relatively low threshold or low barrier to entry. It's, you know, you go through and you know, you can get your license, and I think this is really going to have those top agents that do business the right way, that know what they're doing, that are professionals. They're going to thrive in this new industry. And those that kind of got their license to help their second cousin, you know, buy a house, they're going to get out of the business. And so I really think the overall quality of the industry will improve.
And COVID really changed a lot of our interactions with buyers and sellers, because we weren't sitting down with the buyer at the office doing our whole buyer's consultation. It was, okay, you want to see this property? We'll meet you there. We were masked up. We had gloves on, you know, the hand sanitizer, the whole bit. And so I think it shifted the way we did business. And now it's, I think, a benefit to buyers to be able to sit down with them and explain everything.
Well, and you raise a really good point that I hadn't really thought about until just now, which is what we had to go through with COVID and coming out of COVID with showings. Remember, you had to get like seller permission, or, you know, and
those forms.
Right, that was more of an adjustment to how we did business, and I think this is. And so, yeah, it's an industry that it's been done the same way for so long, real estate, and there's been, you know, disruption in various ways. But I don't see this. I think this is simply, unlike COVID, where we really had to change the way we did business, including how we did closing. We were doing like drive-through closings and stuff. You know, it was like, that was a fundamentally different way to do business for obvious reasons. This is not going to be that way. I think this is going to be far more manageable. And again, there will be a period of adjustment, but after that.
Do you think buyers were under a misconception that they don't need representation because houses were selling quickly, or maybe sellers in that case? And there are so many steps to the process, and representation is really important. And I don't know that it was communicated during COVID as well, just because we were limited.
Or anytime.
Well, that's exactly it. To me, I think, again, one of the benefits of this is I don't think previously that as an industry we were promoting the value of buyer agents well enough. And what this is going to do is really force us to do that, which is a great thing. And one of the things I've talked about often between the time of the announced settlement and now is, some people say, oh, why would you get a buyer's agent now? You know, you can just do it yourself. And I compare it to, you know, going into court by yourself. Mm-hmm. You can be unrepresented and go to court by yourself. Nobody does that. It's insane. I mean, you certainly can do it.
Right.
You talk to anybody, you're going to come out, you're going to fare way better if you have representation, good legal representation, than you will doing it on your own. And that's the same thing with buyer agents. You flip it to the list side. You can list for sale by owner anytime you want. There's proven documentation that if you sell for sale by owner, you're going to sell for considerably less than if you hire a broker to sell.
Right.
Right now we don't have that kind of those statistical evidence because that's hard to show on the buy side. But there's no doubt there is real value in a buyer's agent that.
Well, and I think people really understanding everything that a buyer's agent does.
For sure.
Just opening a door that's
Yeah.
nothing.
Yep.
Because really, once you write a contract, that's the beginning of the buyer's job. Because getting you from there to the closing table is huge.
Yep.
And especially right now, with as active as the market has been and how hard it's been for buyers,
Yep.
because it is a seller's market right now, we've seen so many transactions fall apart.
You saw the news this week, the highest percentage of fall-throughs this past week nationally for
Right.
contracts. Again, not only when you first write the offer, the buyer relationship, I mean, from starting with the showings and the pre-approval process, all of that, like just getting them to the first showing, getting them to writing an offer, that's a whole journey in and of itself. But it doesn't stop there. I mean, there's so much to get to the final closing table.
And if you don't even know how to fill out a contract properly, it is not the listing agent's responsibility
Yeah.
to fill that contract out
Oh,
for
yeah.
you.
And then think about all again, in a market like we're in right now, you go in unrepresented in a multiple offer situation, I mean, you don't have a fighting chance.
Right, because if you have a good agent, they have all kinds of tactics other than the price
Absolutely.
to get you to move up
Yeah,
that bar.
yeah. And then, an appraisal comes back low, you know how to handle it, or there's inspection issues.
Yeah.
There's so much between contract to close that can arise, it sometimes does arise,
Right.
that a buyer's agent is well
And we
versed in
have
handling.
that list of trusted vendors
Yeah.
that we can recommend when everything comes up, whether it's the attorney, the inspector, someone to look at a specific item that comes up in inspection or whatever
Yep.
along
And
the way.
oftentimes, the attorneys turn to us if there's an inspection issue, and they say, you know what? It would be much better if you try to negotiate with the buyer's agent or seller's agent than if the attorneys step in, because then it gets ugly.
Yeah. Well, one thing you guys have done really well is the creation of the team concept, because in real estate, there's the broker, there's an attorney, there's an inspector, there's so many components to it. And if you guys are the broker for your buyer, but the buyer is using his brother who's a divorce attorney to handle the closing, and their uncle who's a plumber, but he's going to do the inspection, that's just not a great practice. So have a team of preferred vendors or whomever that you've worked with, that so when, we've had this come up before, and the attorney's like, I think it's best if you communicate this to the listing agent first. There's so much of that and value in that I feel like, one of the things about our company and our company name is Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices. It's not just a brokerage, it's a full service company. That brokerage is just one aspect. We have to get that to closing, and
So
there's a
full
lot
service
involved.
is
full service is
mortgage lending,
Yeah.
it's title,
Yeah.
it's insurance.
Look at you. You know
But
what
I
you're
mean,
talking
that,
about. I like
for our
that.
listeners who don't know
I
what
know,
full
that's
service
good. Yeah,
is,
right.
yeah, and not every brokerage offers that.
For sure.
And we are not charging extra for it.
Nope.
And it does make for a very smooth transaction.
Oh no,
It
right?
does.
When it happens.
Berkshire Hathaway is our name. Home Services is what we do. I think that's what we say. Yeah. something like that. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Berkshire Hathaway is who we are. Home Services is what
what
we
we
do.
do,
Yeah.
yes.
So, Mark, how do you think this settlement could impact competition among real estate agents and brokers?
So that's something that I think the answer will be how we see it play out. Here's, in my opinion, the major players in this industry are going to do things the right way. And so I think competition will be as it's always been. Everybody above board, what have you. My only concern is will there be a sector of the industry that doesn't play by the rules? And that's always been, a possibility. And, one of the things that I am waiting to see how this plays out is the enforceability or the regulation of buyer's agreements. We know that buyer's agreements are required to be executed prior to the first showing. We haven't heard anything about how that's going to be regulated.
Right.
So is mom and pop brokerage down the street gonna abide by that, or they're gonna get a call from someone that says, I want to look at home, they'll say, okay, I'll take it right there. The listing agent is not gonna say, that's not their responsibility, nor should they say, I need to see a buyer's agreement before I show it to you. And so we'll have to see how that plays out. But I think really what I said about the industry, this is going to make our business better. It's more transparent once we work out the kinks. I think what they intended to do by this settlement was good. How they got here, maybe not so much.
It's been a winding
but right,
path.
I mean, the one thing I look at is, you look at commercial real estate. They don't offer compensation to you take your client out. It's part of the offer, and I truly envision a day not that far off where sellers will not offer compensation to buyers. It will be you're as a listing agent, you go in, you meet with the seller, you say, I'm gonna, my fee is, or I'm gonna charge 3% commission. If it's an unrepresented buyer, an additional 1%, and every offer that comes in will have an addendum, or when the 8.0 eventually comes out, hopefully a place in there where the buyer's agent can write in the offer of the buyer's compensation that the seller's to pay the buyer's agent. That's how commercial. They write a letter of intent. It's like, here's our offer.
Commercial agents are kind of laughing at us right
exactly.
now. They're like,
right. They're like, why are they freaking out about it? Right.
What's wrong with you?
Exactly. And so I don't think it's going to. It's just we've done things the same way for so long that it's just like, oh my God, what's going to happen? So.
Right. Some agents that have been in the business a really long time said that, before computers were around, they were having books, and they would meet a client in the office, and there were books, and they would look at listings in a book, and it's always changing. I think every industry is changing, and we're just at a change right now, and we need to get comfortable with this change.
And I think one of the most interesting changes that I can't wait to see how it plays out is going to be the offer of compensation, because right now, so come August 18th, you have a buyer that wants to go look at properties in Highland Park between a certain price point. You go on the MLS, you see 10 properties come up. There's no offer of compensation because that field is gone now. Are you gonna, okay, I'm gonna pick up the phone and call all 10 of these agents and say, hey, is your seller offering buyer compensation? Yes, okay, send me documentation that, okay, call it to, is your seller offering? You're going to go through all that, or are you going to go to, okay, that's a Coldwell Banker list, I got to go to the website and see if it's, or are you just going to go look at the properties, not knowing if or what the offer of compensation is? If they're interested, you write an offer, and then your offer is seller pays buyer's agent 2.5% commission, whatever your commission is. That's what I don't think it's going to be where the buyer's agent will need to know whether seller's offering compensation, because it's going to be, we are just making it part of every offer that we write is going to have an offer of compensation to me, the buyer's agent.
Right. And that's how we get paid.
Yeah.
And we need to communicate that a little better, because I don't think anybody would be willing to work for free, or less than free, with driving around and paying for gas and all that. So there needs to be some sort of equilibrium here.
So one thing that has always frustrated me about our industry is I've always considered our industry professionals. We're professionals, and oftentimes the consumer or our clients don't look at us this. Like, would you ever ask a doctor to charge less for the surgery they're going to do on you? Or would you ever ask your attorney to be like, can you waive that fee because what? No, it's just not that way. And I think, again, what this settlement and the changes are forcing us to do is communicate our value more than we've ever had to, and I think in the end that's a really good thing.
Well, and when we sit down for a listing agreement,
Mm-hmm.
we go to a listing appointment, and
Exactly.
we want to list your, we're in the running of one of the agents that you might be interviewing to list your home. We're going to talk to you about compensation at some point, and we don't have a problem having that conversation.
Right.
It's going to have to be no different on the buyer side.
Right.
Now we have the same conversation when we sit down and do a buyer's consultation, and that buyer deserves the same amount of respect that we give to that listing.
Yep.
Client.
That's exactly right. Like, for so long, the real estate transaction has been kind of unilaterally seller focused. Now it's going to be how it should be.
Mm-hmm.
What you're doing with a seller on a listing, we're just doing the same thing on the buyer side. And that's how it should be. There are two separate components to the transaction, and they should be treated equally, as opposed to, oh, we're only having a conversation with the seller, and the buyer kind of just deals with it. This is really the right way to do it.
And that buyer's consultation should be so important. I mean, we just closed a transaction. We spent over 6 months with our clients because they were in that sweet spot where everybody else in our area is at.
And wrote 7 offers and lost out on,
6
finally.
of them.
Yeah.
Do you think that buyer could have done that on their own?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Not.
And I think those kinds of stories and communicating the value. I mean, writing 7 offers. I mean, writing 1 or 2 offers takes a whole lot of time. Going through that process.
And their emotions.
Right.
They were crushed when they lost a couple of them.
Being unrepresented and doing that, they'd be no way they would ever get the home that they ended up with. So that's just.
And in the kind of market that we're just kind of coming out of, it's starting to soften just a little bit.
For sure.
That was what buyers were going through. That's not an atypical story.
Right. Well, I think too, we have to remember as we look at the changes that are coming. Right now, we're just looking at it through the prism of the market that we're in, this seller's market. Flip it around to 2018 when homes are sitting on the market for 262 days, and you're a seller. You might say, I'm going to offer a big commission to the buyer's agent.
Right. They were out there. There were bonuses. I'll pay you extra if you can get it closed by
to make
X
my
date.
listing, and I'm going to have my listing agent.
I'll pay down points for you, Mr. Buyer.
So again, but the beauty of what's going to happen come August 17th is the conversations between buyer and buyer's agents will occur, and the conversations between seller and seller's agent will occur the way it should. And so I think ultimately, this time next year, I think we'll all be way relaxed and refreshed and have be like, oh, this was nothing. It was so easy, and the market's better, the industry is better now.
What
as a result
were
of it.
we worried
I know,
about?
right? Totally. Commercial brokers be like, see, it wasn't so bad, right? Yeah.
Well, Mark, I hope we can have you back a year from now,
there
and we can all talk about how it actually played out.
Yeah, and see how right or wrong we were.
Yes.
Totally.
But we appreciate you coming and chatting with us this morning, and it is evolving, and we do hope we can have you back again.
And hopefully you cleared up some of the misconceptions about what is really happening.
Yeah.
Everyone's still getting paid.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just, the goal is more conversations to communicate full transparency about commissions and who's paying what. And I think that ultimately is a good thing for our industry.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well,
thank you.
And thank you for joining us today. Like and follow us at Help Nobody Told Me.